everyone, and welcome back to the Grateful Not Greedy podcast. My name is Kris, and I am here with my very definitely defined co-host, and her name is
Rachel. Hello.
It's definitively Rachel. There's no other name for you. It's just Rachel.
Nope. And it's just Kris.
It's just Kris. So actually, sometimes it's something else. Yeah, it's just Kris. So happy Grateful Not Greedy podcast date, everyone. And we are here back, and we're laughing a little bit because we want to talk about something very specific today so that we can all get clear on how do we define the words that we say. What does it mean? The words that are coming out of your mouth, what do they mean? And I think we all have this experience, right? Because I might say something and that means something to me. And I think everyone must understand that. And that might not necessarily be true. And probably most of the time it's not. So, Rach, why don't you start? Because I think you always have a good way of developing these more nebulous conversations for the rest of us. And in my concrete world, I sometimes can be a little too discreet. So why don't you tell us what it's like to define your world?
All right. Well, this topic is actually something that I've been thinking about a lot because I think even though we have conversations all day and with people we are close to, with people we love, that we know deeply, we're often not communicating well, or we think we're communicating the same thing. And we find out we're actually using the same word, whether it is success or vacation or whatever. And
That's
their definition of a vacation is very different than my definition of a vacation.
So true. I never even thought about that one. Yeah, completely. I can tell you, I have a very different definition of vacation than most people probably. Yeah,
totally. So if you're saying like, yes, a vacation, and the other person's like, oh yeah, a vacation, and their version of a vacation is like glamping up in the mountains, unplugging completely, whatever. And yours is like not on a resort, like on the beach with all the services and massage,
Completely. Yes.
And you guys you don't start talking about what that is. You'll have this conversation and it'll never meet. And I was just having a conversation like this with a friend of mine, and I was like, looking at like living a big, beautiful life. And, I live here in Hawaii. Right. And his response was, I don't want that big life. Like, I just I left California. It was too much. Like, I want that simple life. And I was like, no. I don't mean big, like big LA style. Like, big can be anything. Like, even the word big sounds like it can be quite nebulous
and controversial, clearly.
Yeah. And controversial. So it's like a big life is like, what is big for you?
What is a
for
big
me,
life?
It's like,
yeah.
Being in nature every day, getting in the ocean, like doing the things I want to do. That's a big, beautiful life. And I feel like that is my version, but that would not be people's versions everywhere.
No,
and
definitely not. Most people can't deal with pigs and chickens in their yard, Rach. That's just most people. Look at my great big beautiful life, my local pig.
Yeah.
Here he is.
Well, and this is a really good point. Hawaii. What is your definition of Hawaii versus mine? Like, my definition of Hawaii is not the one you see on postcards.
No,
it is not.
Correct.
It is not with the pig and the chicken and lava rocks falling from the sky.
Unless it's a luau, there's no pig on that postcard for Hawaii. Exactly.
That's true. That's true. So part of it is like when we use these words, we throw them out. Everyone has their definition and applies it to the word Hawaii and applies their definition. And then they have that and they have this experience. And then they're talking back to you based on their definition. And then you're having a conversation based on yours. And the conversation is like two cars going in opposite directions.
Or a car on a track. Right, exactly. But it's such a good point you're making, even just because culturally and everything, because you say Hawaii, I say Hawaii, someone else who's native says Hawaii. It's just like those are three totally different experiences of that word, right? Or what that word means and the expectations that comes with that word. I'm sure we'll cover this in this conversation because it ends up, you realize almost all of our words are loaded with something.
They are.
Right? So it's loaded with perception. It's loaded with the meaning that you give it. It's loaded with your experience. It's loaded with whatever. And we're definitely not speaking the same language. For sure.
Right.
I have a very limited, way of my world because it's based on who I am.
Right. And something that is like really important to me right now, like in my world that I try to get in every day, is the idea of play. And so I'm always like, play. And I was talking to somebody and I was like, do you play? And they're like, yeah, I play all the time. And I was like, amazing. And I don't ask them how they play. And I was like, great. And I was like, let's play. And I find out their version of play is very different. Mine's silly for no reason, no result, like just for the sheer sake of doing something. Like if I go out and like go play pickleball, right? I'm going out there, I'm just having fun and maybe
Easy
I get
now,
better.
Rach. That's that. Talk about a loaded
I know.
conversation. I mean, I don't even know
I know.
if we should get a word.
But that might be some people might call that practice, like
Oh
physical
yeah.
activity. So for me,
Or
it's like a version of play. Okay, so let's switch it up. Let's say bags, like cornhole bags. Like that
yeah.
to me is play. Like go out
Although
there,
that's
you
like
throw
a
the
sport
bags.
that's on like TV and everything. Yeah.
It is. But for me, I approach it as play. And then if
I do too because I
and then
suck at it. So of course of course I have to call it play. There's nothing else I can call it.
okay. But some people approach it and they're like, I think of play like it's a skill. I'm gonna build it and I'm gonna get better at it and I'm gonna try and understand it and I'm gonna like each time and da 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 and like
Yeah.
really try to continue to fine tune it. And that's their version of play. My version is don't even keep track of score. Right.
Yeah. I don't even know
And
how to score that game. I don't even know. I didn't know there was
yeah,
score. But yeah.
there is scoring.
Maybe
There
how many
I
times
could
can you miss the how many times can you miss the hole? That's the score. I mean, that's my score. Yes.
yeah. And so for me, play is just for the sake of doing it with no expectations and no result, like no
Yeah.
expected result there. And like for no reason except for the effect of doing something that makes me feel fun and like a 6-year-old again. Right.
Totally.
And I realize when I ask people about play, I have to ask them specifically, how do they play? Because if I say to someone like, do you play tennis? How they play tennis, maybe I like serve and that ball is going to kill me.
Yes.
And like my version is like, let's just go out and hit the ball around and see what happens. And neither of them are right or wrong. But if we talk about playing tennis and we get out on the court and we haven't discussed what we define as playing tennis,
Right.
oh my goodness,
Oh,
that
yeah.
could be a
No,
disaster.
exactly. I mean, okay, you're bringing up well, I mean, we're just in the sports. I'm sure we're going to switch lanes, but like right now, even in the sports lane, this is why often it's difficult for me to golf with people because, my idea of golfing is we're going out, we're having, like you're saying, like that's your idea of pickleball. I'm a decent golfer. I mean, I'm not terrible. Like I have a pretty decent swing. I know how to hit the ball. I understand the game. Like I play ready golf. Like I got it, check. But my idea is, like you're saying, to go out there to play golf. Oh, do you play golf? Yeah, I play golf, but I play golf for enjoyment. I don't play golf for stress and intensity. And maybe that's what you're getting to. It's like what is this? What do you love your, doggies? Yes, of course I love my doggies, but like that might have a whole different meaning for everyone too, right? That might mean yes, they sleep in my bed and that means I love them, or whatever it is. Yeah, it's so there's so many examples of this confusion that I don't even know, even in one podcast, if we can clear up any of it.
No, so I would say what I've been trying to do to help understand and be better at being able to understand people and have myself understood is to ask the questions. Like, what is that for you? What does that look like? And not just jump in and assume that I know what they're talking about. Because, like, on these little things, it's not that critical. Like, yeah, you might not have a really good time on the courts playing tennis with someone who's like seriously out there to like win it and
Annihilate.
you're just like I'm out there to run around and have a good time.
Yeah.
That's not going to be the end of the world. But then when we get to these bigger topics, which you just are like, yeah, we could focus on the sports, but then you have bigger topics like what is love, right?
What
What
is
is
love?
commitment?
What is
And
commitment? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
there's a really great
What
book
is
called All About
integrity? What is loyalty?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
all of these and
Yeah.
defining them, and not just so I can like understand yours, but even me personally, like what is that to me? Because I know we learn love in our households growing up by our like direct caregivers, right? That is how we learn it. We learn it very young, and and so you grew up in a different house than I did.
I
We
did.
definitely have different definitions of love. We also probably have very different definitions of success because that was also shown to us through growing up. Like all of these things. So it's like the first question I think is like, how do I define it? Like play, I had to figure that out. I was like, what is play for me? Because I keep asking people if they want to play, and it's not how I want to play, unless they're a 6-year-old, and then I'm like, they got it, right? So now I know to ask, because otherwise it ends up being kind of a bit of a disaster. But on these bigger ones, before I can ask someone else, I really have to ask myself, what is
Yeah.
that?
What does it mean to me?
Like,
Yeah.
what
What's
does it
my
mean to
definition
me?
of love? What? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Where did it, and like, it was taught to me, or I learned it, is that still what I want it to be? Right. And like before, I thought I was like, I was playful. And then I was like, oh no, I actually, after hanging around with a 6-year-old, I was like, that is how I want to play. I want to play like a
Yeah, I'm
6-year-old.
so not playful. I'm so not there. Because the love thing is true. It's like, even when someone says I love you, it's like, well, I mean, I'm such an inquisitive person this way. It's probably super annoying if you're in love with me because it's like I love you. Oh, thank you. Okay, you do. You love me. What does that mean? What does that mean to you? What does that really mean? But it's true, right? Like I really do mean. I mean, I know. Okay, we just feel love, but we also know that love can be infatuation. It can be just like immediate feelings. It can be transitory. Like that can be love for a lot of people when they say I love
True.
you. I just need a little bit of clarification on what does that mean and what are you actually saying when you say that, So yeah, I think it's really relevant. Same thing with commitment or same thing, I've just been interviewing people for jobs and it's like when you're interviewing people and they say like, "Oh yeah, I'm really dedicated or I'm really passionate about this." What does passionate mean to you? When you say you're
Totally.
passionate about my industry and you really want to be in doing XYZ, what does that mean to you? I mean, because for me, that means you've exhausted all options of excitement for this industry, and you could display that to me. That's what it means to
Yeah,
me. And to other people, it could just mean like, oh, I really like it. I think it's awesome. I think it's
totally.
fun, and that doesn't mean
Yeah.
I have to prove it. It just means I like it. Right. So even that is like super loaded.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. Interviewing people, you better start asking what they mean by certain things, because
Yes.
you are going to interpret it to be the thing you want it to be. They're like, oh, they're
Exactly.
passionate. So am I. So they
Or
must
they
be like me. Right.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
then all of
which
a
is what
sudden
we'd
you're
want,
like,
right? And now we're enrolled
yes,
in that whole conversation, and now it's like, "Oh, we're the same," and then you miss expectations because you think you're the same, and you get there and you realize like, "Oh, that's not at all what I meant by passionate. I didn't mean that
yes.
by passionate. That was a whole different definition I had." Yeah, yes.
Yeah. It's a really, like, it's the thing that I love about doing this is not just that, like, my part of, like, exploring what are my definitions of these things, but then when someone says something and I'm like, I don't, like, I wonder how they're defining it, it actually slows down the conversation. Because, like, usually we're like, "Oh, I'm passionate about it. Oh, no, wait, you're passionate about it too, da, da, da," and then the conversation keeps going. But if you stop it and you're
Totally.
like, "Okay, what does that mean? Like, how are you passionate about it? How did you know you were passionate about it? How did you stumble? Like, how does that work for you? What drives you? Like, what is, is there something that's gonna make you not passionate about it? Like, or are you in the growth phase and that's why you're passionate about it, like,
Right.
inquisitive? Like, what is
Yes.
that?" And then it's like the conversation just slows down. It doesn't gloss over and it becomes like a more deep and meaningful conversation because now you're actually getting to the crux of it. And for interviewing specifically, that would be interesting. But even like dating,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like
For
slow
sure.
that
But
down.
in some ways, though, I mean, I'm listening to us and I'm just like, my God, I'd be so nauseated. I'd just be like, listen, lady, I don't have to qualify every single word that I say with you.
No, I wouldn't say
Uh,
every
I'm
word, but
finished.
the
Are you?
big
Can I
ones.
clear your plate, sir? Yes, I'm finished. When you say you're finished, now, do you mean you're finished for right now, or that you're finished with that part of the meal and you still like dessert, or that you might want right? It's like, what do you mean
Are
you're
you finished with
finished,
this
right?
whole
Or
experience?
when you say you want to go swimming, does that mean you want to go swimming now, or you want to like you generally like swimming, right? So it can be kind of like annoying, and the other side. So I think for people like us, especially who are super inquisitive and super curious and really interested in what makes people tick and why someone would say that, and I would say completely the opposite, is invite all of us right into this conversation because I'm thinking even if I'm someone listening to this, like, am I thinking, wow, that's really interesting, or am I thinking, gosh, I really hope I never have to define what I mean by passionate to Chris and Rachel.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't okay,
But
I
but
wanna
nonetheless, though, like, nonetheless, it does require you, though, even if you're not that person, it requires you to look at it yourself. I mean, just to be clear, because what I can see happening from this is what I can totally see happening. Well, I said I loved you. I said I was passionate. I said I was committed, and there's a riff, right? Where the other person is like, "Well, that then why would you XYZ? Or why doesn't this happen? Or I didn't see you blah 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 blah. Or you didn't say these 4 words after that." And I think that is really where this conversation can go is in the different definition can live wherever it lives, fine. But the problem is in the middle, the intersection of my definition and your definition. And your definition is built on meanings and expectations, and my definition is built on meanings and expectations, and neither of those necessarily match, right? So how do we kind of like bridge that without without the crusades or the interrogation police, to be able to kind of be responsible even as like people to say, like, when I say I'm committed, what am I really saying? Like, what do I mean? When I say I'm patriotic, when I say I'm a patriot, what does that mean?
Mm.
Because that
Oh,
that
yeah,
means
that's big.
something very different, right? I mean, you could go
Yeah.
anywhere from I sing that my national anthem to I'm an extremist or I'm a nationalist,
Right,
right? So like
right.
even things like that have very different meanings, and then we start making assumptions and judgments and all kinds of things, setting expectations about the conversations we're having and the relationships that we're having. So, I mean, we can focus on some big ones like love and commitment and friendship, like
Mm.
things that people are interacting, family. I mean, family is another one. When you say like, "Oh, I value family," it's like, well, what is family to you?
Yeah.
Because when someone with a massive family says, "I value family," that could also mean that what they value is if you're part of that exchange, you're part of that unit, that you drop everything to support the unit for the good of the unit, right? And I might have a different definition of family. I might be like, I love family too, and family to me is my little like immediate family, and making sure that they're the biggest priority over the bigger unit. Like
Mhm.
that's what I mean by family, right? So
Right.
yeah, I mean, we could tackle some of the big ones and just kinda see where we fall with this because it's difficult. It's hard. These conversations are hard, because
They are.
you know that people
Uh,
are in them all the time,
yeah, and
especially
I
when
think
you
that,
come
like
to the end of something. Like, the love is a good example. "You said you loved me," or, "I thought you loved me," or, "If you loved me, you would," or, "You wouldn't have." All those things are built on my definition of love, and that I don't even almost have to tell the other person. I can just say, "I know for me and my definition of love, if you loved me, then this wouldn't doesn't happen, or if you
Mm.
love me, these 4 words happen, or these," right? Whatever my definition is, and I don't even necessarily have to beat the other person up if I'm not in a healthy exchange, because
Yeah.
that's all part of it.
Yeah. It's, I mean, I guess, like, just to, like, back this up, it's not like all of our conversations, we have to define everything we're talking about. That's not what I'm, like, trying to, express, but I would say anytime that I notice that the conversation is not making sense or we're coming from, I feel like we're speaking different languages, I usually back
Mhm.
it up and be like, "Okay, like, where are we missing?" And it goes back to where, like, the core topic and how it was defined. And so if we're going to kind of break this apart, I would look at it from that standpoint of like, okay, when do you look at definitions? When do you try and understand what people mean? Like, we don't have to be like, are you finished with your plate or not? Like, okay, fine. Don't need to go there. Like, the world's not coming to an end if your plate leaves a few minutes early and you didn't finish your last bites. Totally fine. The other piece is like when you're defining something that is really important and you feel like you're not making headway and you guys are like almost bashing heads, I would say, like, I've noticed when I do that, I'm like shocked at like how we see things totally differently. I'm like, I bet we have very different definitions of this. And then we go back and I was like, what is your definition of play? Like, what is your definition of a relationship? Like, what is your definition of like going out and playing tennis? Like, what is that
Yeah.
for you?
Free time even, people define free time is totally different, like, literally
Totally.
everything. Yeah.
Totally. And like, what is socializing? I'm like, yeah, I'm a social person. And I was like, well, there's lots of degrees of socializing and lots of
Totally.
ways people socialize differently. And that is a huge piece of like who we are and what makes us like a lot of what can bring people joy or what can zap their energy, and being able to stop and be like, okay, what is that for you? Not just saying I'm social or like, I'm an introvert versus extrovert. And I was like,
Yeah.
nah, yeah, like there's degrees in there. There's
So
like there,
many.
you can't just go like I'm this versus this. And I was like, no, 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 no. Let's like really talk about what that is.
It's
And I find that
situational and yeah.
yeah, and I find if you can step back and be able to have that conversation of defining it when it's something that you feel like you guys aren't I'm not communicating well on it, and I'm not feeling like I understand them or they understand me, then you stop and you're like, "Okay, now what is that? Like, what is that for you? What is that for me?" And then usually you're like, "Oh my gosh, we've been talking about totally different things."
Yeah, almost like you
And,
need two totally different words, like they're not even the same word.
yeah, and that is the amazing part is we use these words all day long. and
All day
and
long.
it's not that we're I mean, mind you, like I have been using like I looked up a word and I was like, wow, I've been using that word wrong the whole time. And that is like surprising. And I was like, wow. And then I hear people using it like I had and it makes me think like, oh gosh, okay, there is um that some of it is like just misinformation. And then some of it is just defining it for ourselves, like love. That is definitely defined by ourselves.
Yeah.
But the one that sticks out in my head is like ambivalence, right?
Yes.
And when you say like, do you want to go to this place or this place for dinner? And you're like, I'm ambivalent. And I used to think that was like, it really didn't matter. And it actually
Mm.
means mixed emotions.
Yes.
And I
Toss,
was
toss.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, mixed emotions is very different than it doesn't I'm fine either way, right?
No, because
And
mixed
so
emotions
I'm
is
like,
heavy and the other one is light.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
you can be like, what do you think of, Rachel's friend? And you're like, I'm ambivalent. And I was like, oh, cool. She doesn't care either way. But it actually means you have mixed emotions. You're like, they seem cool, but there's something weird about them that I think that they might not be telling the truth. That is a whole different conversation.
Oh, I mean, I'm thinking about the conversation if you come home with like your, spouse or whatever. You're like, hey, I got this new job opportunity in Cincinnati. What do you think? They're like, oh, okay. I guess I'm ambivalent about that. You're like, great. Off we go. Perfect. And since you don't care, we'll just go off to Cincinnati, go Reds.
Yeah, totally. That is exactly
But it's true.
great
But
example on that.
I mean, we laugh about it, but you realize like so many of these conversations that are so serious and end up getting so go down these rabbit holes because we aren't being clear about these definitions and what do we mean by the words that are coming out of our mouth? What do we mean by what we say? And sometimes you say something like, "Oh my gosh, I totally didn't mean it like that," or "I didn't mean that." That word didn't mean it that way. That's one thing. But we're talking about words that are you say them exactly like you think you mean to say them because that's what
Totally.
you mean
Yeah.
by that. Like, that is what you
Yeah.
mean by that, and we can't all get in a big powwow and decide, like, love means these right things. Here's the criteria for love, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I guess you could. You'd have to write the biggest paper that ever been written on it. But, uh,
Oh, yeah, there's books and books on
yeah,
that. And so, of course, and then like what does love between a parent and child mean versus you and your partner or you and your best friend or you and your family, your like relatives, like whole different thing. And we use that one word to cover it all. And I'm
all
thinking
of
like,
it.
how is that possible? Like,
How is
how
it?
are we able to use that word that covers so much? And really understand when I talk about love that you have any idea what I'm really talking about. Like how we
I'm
right?
flabbergasted. No, it's true. I mean, it's true now that I'm really thinking about it, and those specific big words like family. I'm like
Mhm.
even when you say, "Oh, I wanna," like if you're a younger couple or whatever, and you're just dating someone, you're like, "Oh yeah, I want a big family." Like, I'd love to have a big family. It's like, well, what is a big family? Is a big family to you 2 kids? That could be a big family to you. I don't know. Is it a big family to you 6 kids? Is it 10? Is it, like adopted kids from all over the world? Like, what does that mean? Because that person obviously has a reason. They have something in their head. I think this is where I'm getting with this expectation stuff. When you say a word, you have something in your head about the meaning or about what you're trying to express, right? And if that's not being met the same way, that's where it's like, well, my expectation when I said I wanted a big family and you said, oh, great, me too, was that we would keep adding kids forever until until all the kids on our street were, like, were ours, right? That's
Yeah.
one way, right? And so I think you could see, I mean, now that we're talking about this, you can see the opportunities for breakdown in communication with this lack of definition defining. It's kind of interesting even on that word, right? It's a definition. Why? Because you define it. How do you define it? You say, this is what this means, right? Like, here is the definition. And we all agree that that's the definition, but we don't all agree on the interpretation of the definition, right? So even if the definition of love, I don't even know what it is, but I'm sure we could all look at that definition, but then in our heads, we're creating a different image. We're creating a different meaning. We're creating a different expectation around that, and getting kind of clear on that. I feel like that's a very powerful conversation, even in Grateful Not Greedy, right? So it's like, okay, grateful
Yes.
is like, because I think the whole where do you like come with this with the Grateful Not Greedy? Because the greedy thing is I feel the greedy thing is you have my same definition and off we go. And I never have to explain myself. I never have to clarify. I never have to have anything. And it's just always going to go, it's always going to go swimmingly, and we're not going to have any issues, quote unquote, right? No issues, because that's very greedy. And I think the grateful side is, to your point, that we have these opportunities not only to explore it, but just to almost understand that this is part of the world, right? Understand that reality is that there are these words that even in different languages mean something different, in different cultures means something different, and to me means something different than to you. And so if we can appreciate that, just be grateful for the concept. Grateful not greedy is, grateful is, this is the way it is. The way it is, we have all these words that we think we know the meanings of. We think everyone agrees with us, and they don't, right? They don't necessarily. And then the greed is, why don't you agree with that? Why would you think anything different? I didn't expect that. I don't understand why you would think that. It's all like the accusation and the almost like the disbelief, like something's wrong here if you have a different interpretation or if you're approaching this differently, rather than just looking for the acceptance of, oh, you define love as being a good Samaritan. There are people who really are into that. Like, that's kind of one of their languages, right? Is, if someone needs help, they're coming to rescue, right? So that's love. And I define love as boundaries. And those are just completely different, right? On this like 180 on that plane, right? So yeah, I mean, you can take it from there in terms of like the grateful not greedy interpretation, because it really is such a big opportunity for greed in this, to look at, are you defining it my way? My way.
Right.
The correct way,
Yeah. Assuming everyone is like coming it through, like using my lens for the definition and my experiences, because it's not just, and these words that are also defined by, like, another big one, success, right? How do you define
Success.
success?
Yes.
Like
How do
success,
you?
like we can be like, okay, you look it up in the dictionary, but then you're like, well, how do you personally define it? Like, what is success for you? And when you talk about success, what does that look like? And for me, it's very different living here, what success is versus like, I used to
LA.
be in the
Yeah.
corporate world and like, doing my thing, and, and I defined it very differently. And so I am the same person, just erased like 20 years, and my definition would have changed so much.
Right.
And so it's like the lens and the experiences and the time. And that's where like coming from the greed part is assuming it's not going to change and everyone has the same definitions as I do, right? And what we do know is all of these big ones, and even so, like even the word play, like as a kid we defined it one way, as an adult, as an adult without kids, we defined play one way.
Right.
And then,
So
play with,
true.
right?
So true. Yes,
And then
completely.
play once you have kids, and then, play is probably very different once you're in your 80s, like, what
Yep.
And so know that these definitions continue to evolve, and just as they evolve for us individually, they're evolving for everyone around us, and that also includes people we have been friends with for a very, very long time, and we might think we know what their version of play is or success is, but they're not the same person that, when we met before, so the
That's
greed is
true,
thinking
Rach.
like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I know my kid, and I know my kid better than anyone else, right? I spend the most time with him. But he's different today than he was 6 months ago,
Oh,
years
yeah.
ago, whatever. His definition of success is definitely very different today, and his definition of love has changed significantly in the last couple of years. And it's even like the people that we are closest to have these conversations with and to understand it. And the greed part is assuming you know them well enough that they don't even
Yes,
need to. And you're like,
totally.
no,
Totally.
absolutely not. Like we have like those are important steps. And it opens up such interesting conversations. And it opens up and not just like the conversations about learning about someone else, but it also helps me define what it is who I am through
Totally.
these conversations.
Yes.
Right? Like it's not just so I know the other person, it's also getting to know myself even deeper
Right,
to
that's kind of what I
understand
was
what
getting
that
to
is.
earlier, and I was saying, like, the even if you don't wanna go into all the inquisition for someone else, just to be able to get clear with yourself on your definitions, and that is not like you write down a, "No, love means X," but it kinda is, like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Like, when you say that, for you in your life, in your experience, what do you mean? What do you want? What do you expect? What does that entail? What parts are the highest priority of that? Whatever it is, however you're gonna write that. You're right. I mean, and I'm not that is so interesting too, because even what you just said there. So fine. So we even once you kind of get clear on your own definition of love or success or play or whatever the heck, then next year you almost have to like reevaluate that. Do is that my current definition of success? Because look at to your point about success. When you say or I think so many of us would be like, oh, they're so successful. Oh, they're so successful. Oh, or I'm so proud of my uncle. He's so successful. Or I'm so proud of my, grandma. She was so successful. We just internalize. Like for me in my head, I'm like, oh, they must be talking about like financially, or they were on the Supreme Court, or they went to space, something like that. But when when other people, would define it for themselves, you're right. Like they're not going to say, "Oh, this is what I mean about I'm successful." This is what I mean. When you say I'm successful, you're just looking at, did you get on that rocket? Did you invent the internet? Did you do all those things? Or, I whatever. I built this foundation from nothing and I've, put this many kids through college and and whatever, like
Yeah.
that's successful, because you created success. Yeah. It's actually an important little exercise. Like as we're doing this and I'm thinking about like, grateful not greedy, definition version is it's almost like the prompt for every day is like, what do you mean by that? When you say that, you mean that. When you say this, what do you mean? Because it's helpful to get at not to say, oh, I need to define every word, but to your point is so much larger and so much like really smart stuff. Is to say I am defining who I am by the words that I'm choosing and how I'm choosing to use them in what context and with whom. Right? So, I might say to my little kids, "Oh, you're so successful." Like, okay, great. And when I tell my little kids successful, I mean, they didn't yell at anyone that day and they didn't have a temper tantrum and they, might have cleaned up their room and they might have, patted themselves on the back. They might have been proud of themselves. They might have said, whatever. That's just a very limited definition of that word. And as we're evolving and thinking about who we are and what we're doing with it, being able to be clear on these definitions for yourself to me is like the most valuable part of this conversation because that also then translates into you being more like just considerate or effective or relational with other people. You could have really valuable relationships if you're clear on what your definitions are and what you mean. And when you say something, you know what you mean. And other people know what you
That's
mean by that.
such a good point. And it's like, know thyself, right? This is what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like what you're hitting on is know thyself. And so, like, of these big topics, of these big words that can be so nebulous and so large and evolve over time, like, what are these things for you now? And then it's like, if you want to, and when you are clear on that and you put that out there, that clarity is felt, right?
Yeah.
And that
Yes.
clarity is acknowledged and seen. And I think you get that back. Like, I totally believe what you put out is what you get back. So if you're coming out muddled and confused, you're going to get muddled and confused back, right? And so the more clarity that we have about ourselves, the more clarity about who we are and what is it we want and how we use these words, and know that we use these words, each of us, very differently, then that changes, that shifts so many relationships, so many ways, and not just the relationships outward, but the relationship inward with yourself, of getting clear of like who exactly you are. And that's where, like, this process of, like, you know not assuming, the greedy part, the like being grateful, just like diving in and getting clear and having the conversations with yourself. And even I love your point, like the context of grateful, not greedy. Like when we talked about this years ago, the definition of this has completely evolved and changed over time.
Yes.
And that's what we want. We want these words to be living, breathing, evolving things just like us. And they
Totally.
have to be.
Yes.
Because if we lock them into place, they're not going to work. They're not going to work for me in a couple of years.
Yeah. Well,
They
then it's
have to
like 10 more
change.
conversations and we're done. Check.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we
We've
need to
covered
have them
everything.
evolve.
So we're good.
Yeah, exactly. Up, that's outdated. Like, let's get rid of that one. And we need to we need to update them, and that's part of the growth of it. And that's, and to think that we walk around and have these conversations, that these things don't happen, that things don't change. Like, I mean, we change constantly, and the people around us change constantly, and how we use the word changes constantly, or what our definition behind it. It's like, and I know where you're like, oh, great, our conversations is like going to the store and ordering something is going to be like so complex now. It doesn't have to be that way. It does not. That's not what I'm
Well,
saying.
there's a reason I didn't become a lawyer, Rach. And like, here it is, like laboring over laboring over an and
Totally.
or a the, a this or a that,
Yes.
like everything is this laborious process because, but it's true. We have an entire profession built on what? Words,
Yeah.
intent, meaning, like
Yes.
agreements. We agree that this is what it means, and then when we define what it means by late, I mean 2 days. But that it's postmarked. Is it postmarked, or does it reach the mailbox? Does it reach your mailbox or my mailbox? I mean, like, this is what lawyers spend their lives. At least contract law lawyers do. They spend their life going through every little piece of this to make sure that there's no ambiguity in the agreement or in the language of what's being said. And can it be interpreted differently? And if it can, let's make sure that it can't. Make sure that there's one interpretation, which is, I mean, it's true. That's why we have constitutional lawyers right now, because they sit around and figure out how to go tell the Supreme Court that the Constitution is interpreted this way, not that way. And this is what they meant by that. And by this case fulfills that because this is what is meant by that. And we're defining that in political ways and in personal ways all the time about what these words mean. And your point is so well taken, just in terms of where we have control of that is to get clear on what we mean, to get clear on who we are, to get clear on where we're coming from. And then once you have that kind of under wraps a little bit, but like you said, it's a moving target because it keeps evolving. But once you kind of get a sense of that, then you can step out, piece by piece to engage and interact with other people and see if you can get alignment or agreement or whatever. But particularly in these relationships, I can just see, I'm it's like a mother-daughter thing. I think about the conversations I've had with my kids, my girls especially. And, this is where you really can see these breakdowns happen so easily. One, because, it's parents and kids. I think that's kind of a thing. But even just in, you know, when I said be home at a reasonable hour.
Wow. You got to get a lawyer on that one.
I said drive safely. I mean, I was in the car with my daughter the other day, and I was just like, "What? Who are you? Like, what is this car do? What is this magic this car is doing? Because it's not like it's flying. I'm pretty sure it's flying. This is not just a driving car." So yeah, and so her definition of driving safely and my definition of driving safely are very different. And the reasonable hour, or yeah, anything that could be like left with some ambiguity. And again, like that sets up the expectation. So I have in my head, be home at a reasonable hour. I have in my head what a reasonable hour is, and it's sometime probably before, I don't know, some bad things start happening, like whatever time that is. I mean, like I'm not a massive curfew person, but I imagine that would be like, I don't know, 11, midnight, something like that, kind of like after midnight, nothing
Yeah.
good happens, right? So yeah, but even just that, and those kinds of conversations, I can see the breakdown where, like for whatever reason, because I'm a parent and I have a kid, or because I'm, I have this car and you have that car, the definition of speeding or the definition of any of it is just totally different. And play is a great example too, because I don't even know if, and many of us as adults have a really solid definition on what it means to play, because we've talked about this before, how foreign that concept is as just
Yeah.
as a verb, as like something we do.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah, it's true. I think so. What you hit on is when we have conversations and we're dealing with a significant age gap, those
Yeah.
definitions will be different, right?
Yeah,
So the
that's
parent
a good
child,
point.
because we're talking about like someone, when I talk to my mom, who's, quite a bit older than me,
Yes.
our
Yeah.
definitions are very different too. Like I want fiscally responsible, and like
Yeah.
our definitions are very different on what that is.
Totally.
Um, and and so I think part of it is when we get between different, when the age gap is significant,
This
those
is a
the definitions will be can be significantly different.
yeah.
And then you hit on another one, and you like earlier, culturally, right? Culturally, the word means something very different, right? And so we're hitting on the places where we know people walking in are going to have very different ones because they've come from very different places. They have different lenses. But, most likely, I would have a very similar definition of play if I talk to, or let's say success, if I talk to my brother, maybe we'd have the same definition of
Hmm.
success, right? Because we grew up in the same house, we have the same thing, like
But
it
you
would
live
like
very
I
different not very, but you live different lives
yeah,
now.
we
So
do.
I
And I
wonder.
would think like that would be pretty similar, at least an understanding of what it was for us when we were kids, and then we evolved since then. But it is so to your point, like there are places that those you can clearly see that the definitions will be different because there's a gap, whether it's culturally, environmentally, age-wise, that type of thing.
Mhm.
And then there's the other piece that is just like you think this is I think the hardest one is when you think you really know someone,
Yes.
right? Your best friend, your partner, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, like those, your cousin, like someone who you're close with. And then you realize, oh my gosh, we aren't talking about the same thing.
Right.
And all of them are important. I'm not saying any of these are more important than the other, but like they all happen in different places. One is easier to diagnose because you can already see that there is a difference between
Yeah,
the
like
two. But
culturally or whatnot. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And but then when you get into someone who you feel like you really know, I think that tripwire can be pretty big. You're like, what?
Yeah. Yeah,
Like I thought I
especially
knew
like a
you. I
best
like really
friend or a close
we've been living
relationship.
together for how long?
Yeah. Like a new relationship, a close friend, like you said, like a close cousin, like, oh, I remember growing up and we had so much fun, and da, da, da. It's like, yeah, when you get in those situations where you have the memory is the same, but the meaning of the memory is totally different, right? Like, oh, don't you remember? And then I
Totally.
got ice cream. I'm like, yeah, I remember. Then I got a stomach ache, and then that kid threw that thing at me, and all this other stuff happened. You're like, what? It's just like we were talking about before. You think you have the same parents, but you don't, because your experience growing up, though, even though you have
Totally.
shared definitions, your experience of those shared definitions is different. Because you're a different person with the quote unquote same parents, but the parents aren't even the same to any one kid. We all know that too. It's like, as much as you try, you're just not. We're all people, like individuals. So being able to, dissect that a little bit is really important. I think this is a very helpful conversation just to be reflective when you're in these when you're in this situation and you can feel it like bubbling up, like, oh, this is like there's dissension here. What is this? Like, what's going on? And you have a really good point, because you have the opportunity just to slow that conversation down and be like, hey, when I say whatever, I'm really good at pickleball, what I mean is really like I really am good at standing there and being available to play pickleball. I don't mean I'm actually good at the sport, right? Or when I say I'd like to play pickleball, I mean I just like to play at pickleball. I don't mean I'm like, do you play? Like, do you play? You play pickleball. Yeah, or tennis or whatever the heck. Yeah. So I think that's been the most relevant piece of this conversation because these opportunities are everywhere. Like everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. And, just to use my example of, interviewing, job candidates or anything, it's like that's a great opportunity to say, let me tell you what I mean by that. When I said that I'm goal directed, or when I said that I'm, calm in, stressful situations, this is what I mean. Right. And we do that in an interview because we have to. We don't know the people. We're trying to explain ourselves. We're trying to get a job or whatever. But bringing that into kind of an everyday discourse, I feel like is very valuable. Just to notice yourself. I feel like for me, how many times I am saying something without being responsible for the definition, the meaning that I'm putting on it. Like,
Yeah.
be home at a reasonable hour. Like,
Yeah.
that's not fair, really. It's just,
Yeah. That ambiguity is not going to be helpful. So that we know. And then, it's interesting because as you were talking, I was thinking, okay, people you've known for a long time. I mean, you and I have known each other for over 25 years, right?
wow.
I
Wow.
know. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, that's
I
true.
see you calculating right now. You're like,
That's
oh, yeah,
true. We
okay.
have.
Right?
I'm like, how many more than 25? But yes, we've known each other over 25 years. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've known each other over 25 years, which is amazing, right? And the conversations, and we constantly communicate. We are constantly communicating. And even us, when we constantly communicate and we, are always
Yes.
exchanging and it's not like conversations like, how was your day? It's like, I'm diving in. Here's what's going on. There we,
Download incoming. Yes.
yeah, we like even that I think about sometimes when you're talking, I was like, wow, I really should have stopped and asked, like, what do you mean by that? Like, what is that? And I don't know. And sometimes I'll be like, oh, I'm so hurt and like this, because of this. And I'm like, what do I mean? Like, what is
What
that?
do
And even
you mean?
though
Yeah.
we know each other well and we know we think similarly in a lot of ways, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I bet if we like stop a little bit every once and again and stop and be like, what are we really talking about here? Like, what is
Totally. Are we talking about the
you
same
know?
thing? Rather even that, you could be in accord about two different things, but you think you're agreeing. Like, yeah,
Exactly.
I feel the same way, Rach. I totally think the same thing, and I'm then thinking about something totally differently, and it's not necessarily, coming the same. And yeah, I think there's just so many opportunities just to kind of expand. I think really for me, it comes to that by doing that, that makes my life more enjoyable. It's not that this like drags me down or it's so it makes my life more enjoyable because that means I'm clear, and clarity is peace in my world.
Mm.
Clarity is peace.
Ooh.
So if I can get clear with myself, if I can in conversations know that, like even I remember so many years ago, when my mom passed away suddenly, tragically, and my literal like head just flipped. And my first thought was like, thank goodness we're all clear. And by that, I meant we're all kind of caught up. Like there's no dissension. No one's having a 20-year disagreement about something or whatever. I said we're all clear, like in my little world in my head. And it's super powerful. So in that way, kind of incorporating this conversation allows me to have clarity, which in turn allows me to have greater peace in my life. And that's kind of like the money shot of this whole conversation is the opportunity for greater clarity and therefore, for me at least, greater peace.
Mm. Yeah. So really, I love that summary of it is like um, getting peace through clarity, right? And being clear. It's a beautiful way to look at it because as we were starting this conversation, I'm like, this conversation, like, it's been mind blowing. The more I think about it, the more I stumble on it, and the more I've been like seeing it and understanding, like, I didn't define that the same, and that's where that that disharmony came from, and all that. I can see it in hindsight. So now I'm like, okay, so I want to get in front of this. I need to first get in front of it for myself, right? And then, like, when I'm feeling it, like you said, when it feels like we are not communicating well, we're not like, to stop and be like, okay, here's where perhaps we're talking about two, we're using the same word, but we're using it very, very differently, and having that conversation. And you're right, like that through, clarity comes peace. And I guess that's really what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
to understand that.
Yeah. Yes. And important in what you said too. It's like you're having a conversation, you realize that you're not seeing eye to eye rather than taking the bait, which is this is what we're talking about. This is what I mean. You took it the wrong way. You said this. You're taking it all, you're blowing it out of proportion. You, blah, 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 blah. It's the responsibility of, oh, maybe we're not seeing eye to eye. When I said this, I was referring to X. I was thinking
Right.
about it this way. How are you thinking about it? Person that I'm not
Yeah.
seeing eye to eye with, like, how are you thinking about it? Or what's true for you? And yeah, clarity. And wherever that the grateful thing is, wherever that is fine. Wherever that conversation lies is fine because the clarity is the key. The clarity is the key because now you have clarity. Now you can be responsible for whatever choice you want to make or don't want to make or conversation you want to continue or don't want to continue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because you've cleared it, cleared the air, and now you have choices, right? Now you have choices. Now you have peace. Now you have all that stuff. So yeah, this is like, I love the way that this was moving along because I was like so lost not lost, but it's just because it's such a confounding topic, these definitions. What does it mean? What do you mean? What do I mean when I say love? What do you mean when you say love? What are we going to do? How are we going to play? All that stuff. But just to get clear, state some definitions, get some general parameters and then make choices and live your peaceful life. Off you go. Perfect. Yeah, because the greed is the bait. The greed is the bait of not being responsible for it and blaming it, blaming on someone else. And this is true. I don't care if you're political minded or it's your neighbor or your friend or your kid or whatever. It's that tendency to adopt your definition as the truth, and that's where we all kind of can get in a little bit of trouble. I think for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you,
Yes.
Rachel.
Yeah, well, this was really good. So I have a lot more clarity now.
I do too. I like that. I even how we can define definitions. Like, let's look for the definition. Yeah, it's very helpful. So, yes, I will just say with that, in perfect clarity, perfect peace, that this has been, is, and forever will be the Grateful Not Greedy podcast. Thanks for joining us. We hope to see you next time. And aloha, Rach.
Aloha, Kris.